Right, Chevre, good morning. With a lot of joy, we are starting the new Masechta, the third to last Masechta in Seder Zroyim, Masechta Chala. That means Yerushalmi, Chala, Perik Aleph, Halacha Aleph, as we have the pagination in the Yerushalmi Daf Aleph, all the way on top. A couple of words of introduction. Let's begin with the Chumash. In Parsha Shalach, the Torah writes, Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'yamartu aleihem, Bivoyachem el haaretz, asher ani mevi eschem shama. Rashi, bivoyachem el haaretz. I'm reading Rashi in Chumash. Mishuna biyazu mikol biya shebatayra. Shebekulam nemar kisavoy, or in the plural kisavoyu. The bivoyachem is very big. Rashi in Chumash writes, bivoyachem el haaretz comes to teach you that unlike Trumas u'Maisres, as we just learned, whose obligation only began after the Sheva Shenichbeshu, the Sheva Shechalku. That's when we started to count. The years of the Shemitah, we started to count once we were already physically in the Holy Land for 14 years. Year 15. I think it was 2503. But the Chiyuv of Chala, says Rashi, began Bivoyachem. Bivoyachem Mamish. And we're going to get into nuance. We already quoted that. I want you to know that aside of what Rashi writes, there's something else that we learned from Bivoyachem el haaretz, and that is really subject to a big machlokes rishonim. Let me say this, that when I say nowadays, we are learning at the end of the month of Tammuz Tavshin Pevav. We are living at a time in which a huge shift is happening, which is that there is a difference whether the majority of the Yidden are living outside the Holy Land versus if the Roiv of the Am Yisrael are living in the Holy Land. This could affect whether the obligation of separating Chala in Eretz Yisrael is midoraisa or midrabanan. When the majority of the Yidden are not living in Eretz Yisrael, even though the Chiyuv of Chala is connected, it's a mitzvah hatuluya ba'aretz midoraisa. I know that everyone in LA takes challah. Yes, that's midrabanan. But midoraisa, it's about making the dough in Eretz Yisrael, not where the grains grow, where the dough was made. But in addition to where the dough is being made, either you have to have the majority of the Jewish people living in Israel, which when this will happen, mamash in our times, maybe it happened, it's happening. Then it's going to go from a midrabanan to a doiraisa. There are other rishonim that learned from bivoyachem el haaretz that it's only midoiraisa when we entered Eretz Yisrael in one go. When did that happen? When Yeshua entered Eretz Yisrael. When Ezra entered Eretz Yisrael, it's not only that the majority of the Yidden were still living outside, sadly. No, it's more than that. Is that we didn't enter in one huge entrance. When will that happen? Writes the Rambam, when Mashiach will come. In other words, even though the kibbutz golius is a process that's happening right now, but there's going to be a moment where there's going to be a mass immigration to Eretz Yisrael. Bivoyachem. We're going to, and up until that, according to some Rishonim, even if the majority of the Yidden live in Eretz Yisrael, it's also only midrabanan. Now, a couple of things. First of all, the property, the flour, has to belong to a Yid for there to be a challah. Has to be fit lachilas adam. This is important. Basic dinim. There is the shir that the Mishnah Gemara will call 5 roivas. The word roiva means a quarter. I love it. 5 quarters. That means a kav and a roiva. But the way Chazal spoke, they didn't say a kav and a roiva, it's 5 roivas. 5 roivas is also known in the Mishnah as 43 point, a fifth of an egg, 43 average chicken eggs plus 0.2 or a fifth of an egg, in order for there to be a chiyuv doiraisa of separating challah. Big machlokes in shiurim, from now, when I grew up, it was always between the Chazon Ish and the Rabbi Avraham Chaim Noah, who was a Lubavitcher Chassid, so we're biased. We follow his opinion. It's also closer to reality. And let me just say, Bekitzer, I know what I'm saying now is subject to many opinions. If you make a dough that has less than 2.5 pounds, let's speak pounds, you don't separate challah at all. If you make a dough, if you're using the quantity of 2.5 pounds, which is a half of a pack of what you buy here in the supermarket of flour, just 5 pounds, 2.5 to 5, even though some people say 2.5 to 4, you separate challah without a bracha, because some will hold you're not chayiv. How can you make a bracha? Safik bracha is lahakal. It's a bracha. Birchas ha-mitzvahs is midrabanan. When it's doiraisa, you're machmed, but when it's a midrabanan, you don't make a bracha. Once you put together a dough of 5 pounds or more, according to many, 4 pounds or more, you separate challah with the bracha. We're familiar with it. Now, I know that currently we live in Los Angeles. It's taka only midrabanan. So what? But we're going to get to many other details. Some of them you know, some of them you don't know, as we unpackage this Masechta. It's important for people not to look to circumvent the obligation. Even though we learned in the last chapter about the ways that you could lachatchila circumvent, ha'arama, we spoke about it in Ma'aser Sheni. Let me go to challah. Don't make little doughs for you not to be chayiv. If you did it, you did it. But make fakert. I know many people now, even chutz la'aretz, that when they bake challah for Shabbos, they dafka will use 5 pounds to make hafrashas, to make the bracha. Even though they don't need it, they'll put it in the freezer, they'll give it away. At least to make it from 2.5 pounds for you to do the actual separation. What's amazing about challah, which separates challah from all the trumas u'maisers, even for people that live in Eretz Yisrael, especially nowadays that many kashrus organizations take off the hafrashas trumas u'maisers prior to you, to me, the consumer. We're not farmers, so many of us don't do it. Challah is something that every Yid is shaykh to, even if you're not a farmer. I'm not only speaking about the we that live in chutz la'aretz, so we don't do trumas u'maisers at all, but everyone here knows challah. Everyone did challah. They did it with your mothers. You did it at home. You know challah. Even in Eretz Yisrael, not everyone is a farmer. You go to the market, not every market now tells you to do it fakert. When I grew up, it was that way. Now you buy stuff, and many Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, you can live in Yerushalmi or HaKodesh. If you're buying that makolet, you'll never take it off. Challah, everyone it's a gabal, it's a mitzvah that everyone feels shaykh to. From when there is a chiyuv of challah, which is from when the dough is thoroughly mixed. These are the words. The dough is mamish tevel. Just like if you have after the meruach, if you did not yet to take away the truma gedolah, a person is going to eat from the product, the chayiv misa b'dei shamayim, even though you resolved all the trumas u'maisres, so now everything is like kosher. Yeah, kosher up until when you make the dough. Now that you made the dough, midorais, I'm speaking about when you are in Eretz Yisrael and you have bias kulchem. It's just to know that's a very chomer thing. And the challah dinoi ketruma. And just to read another, don't worry, the daf is very short. We have time. Just to read the psukim. The Torah calls it a few times truma. We're going to learn today the mi lechem. Torimu truma lashem. The first word that's given is not chala, chalilu, bad words. Torimu truma. And then the next pasuk, reishis arisoy sechem. Chala, torimu truma. And it's mamish ketrumas goyden. Ketrumas goyden means that prior to you taking off the truma, it's tevel misa b'dei shamayim. Prior to the separation of challah, it's tevel misa b'dei shamayim. How much challah has to be separated? Midoiraisa. There is no minimum shiur. We did learn at the end of the last Masechta, and whoever's coming on board now, we're going to learn it again, that may reishis arisoy sechem, because there are two psukim. Reishis arisoy sechem, may reishis arisoy sechem teaches you that even if you want, you can't separate the whole dough as challah. There has to be a separation. Some of it to the kohen, some of it to you. So you can give 99.99 to the kohen and keep a drop for you. That's valid. You can do it in the other direction. Midoiraisa, midrabanan in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, then the Chachamim gave 2 shiurim. A balabas, who's not doing it as a business, should give 1/24th. And a nachtoim, a baker, should do 1/48th. Makes sense. Why does the nachtom have to give less? Because there's two things. There's the mitzvah of separating, then there's the gift. When you give a gift, you'll understand this better if you think about you being the recipient of a gift. You want a gift, a chaticha royal is chabed. You want to give epis to the kohen. Okay, 5 pounds is not that much. I know it is for me in the house. But if I'm going to give a nothing, a mashuhu, midrabanan, it's not a matana. When you give a 24th, how they got to that number, we'll see. A nachlaim is doing a lot more. So even though he's giving half of that amount, he's going to end up giving. So the logic, lahavdil, that tax the rich, you see it's the other direction. The one who's giving more can actually give a smaller percent. Okay. Jewish thinking. Advantageous. That's when you are on this side of the government. Wait until you be on the other side. There'll be other Jewish thinking. Everything you'll find in Chazal just came to me. Another din we're going to start learning in our Mishnah. And that is that the chiyuv of chal is only from the 5 grains. And I'm going to enumerate what I know from my kitchen. Gee, don't ask. That's from some of my family members. How many grains you have today is unbelievable. And the chiyuv, not only midoraisa, midrabanan, is only from the 5 grains. With nuance, what happens if you make a wheat and rice flour? We're going to get, even today, we're going to learn about those nuances. We will also learn in our Mishnah a little bit about the prohibition of eating chadash. Chadash refers to all of the 5 grains, not only to barley. Chadash means that from when any of the 5 grains took root, the only time we, not in the Beis HaMikdash, we will be allowed to partake from it will either be from when the Karban Omer is brought from barley, but prior to that, I can't have the wheat, even if the wheat, the wheat gets readied later, but even if it would be wheat or any of the other of the 5 grains, 5 grains are wheat, barley, we're going to see spelt, rye, and oats. We'll see that in the Mishnah. So we're going to learn about Chadash, and we will also learn in today's daf a lot about what flours are valid to make matzah. Also, only the 5 grains, because only a grain that could become chametz is a dough from which you can make matzah. A dough or flour that doesn't have to be guarded from becoming chametzik, it's amazing. You would think it's even better. Like we learn in Chassidus, there's something special about the avodah of the Beinoni, more than the tzaddik, because a tzaddik cannot sin. You would think, wow, even better. No. That's why we are here. Dafka, because we could become chametzdik, is there value to the fact, to the moments that we don't become chametzdik. Another big topic, and with that we'll leave the introduction that we're going to learn today, and that is that we don't have an argument in Chazal about reality. There is no machloikes mitzias. The mitzias, be boidik the mitzias. What will happen often is that we know the mitzias, but how do we halachically define that mitzias? That could be subject to a machlokes tanoim amiroim chazal, as an example, when we speak about something that could become leavened or chametzik. So just the words in English, there is fermenting, becoming leavened, and then there is decaying. I know the word decaying sounds horrible, rotting. The word leavening, b'mitzias, it's not that different. They're very close one to the other. So when we're going to see here tanoim that are going to hold that you can make matzah from more than the 5 grains. They speak about fennel flour or fennel. We're going to get there. Maybe it includes rice flour. There's a machlokes what it includes. Because it could become l'dei chimutz, it cannot become l'dei chimutz. There's going to be, the Gemara is going to clarify whatever it is that's happening. It's something similar to fermenting. It's not fully fermenting, and there's going to be a machlokes in halacha. How is that defined? And there is where you're going to have what one might have called a machlokes a mitzias. It's not a machlokes in reality. It's a machlokes how you define reality. We'll leave that in our words of intro, and let's go right inside. Gavaldik. Says the Holy Mishnah. Chamisha devarim chayavim b'chala. First of all, my own, what's devarim? It's very unusual. Right? I want to say that the Lashon HaMishnah that we know, normally the Lashon will be chamisha minim. We just had this. I mean, we're in the middle of Zerayim. We're towards the end of Zerayim. Chamisha devarim. 5 types of grain are subject to chala to the exclusion of all others, not only midoiraisa, even midrabanan. What are the 5 types? What are the chamisha devarim? Hachitim, wheat. Hasoirim, barley. Okay, when you can put up pictures. Kusmin spelt. Let me just tell you my nada shesimin that always worked for me is that in the middle of kusmin there's the samach, the spelt. I'm saying how I remember it. Shubayla Shuol has 2 words. So oats is the only one in English that has an S at the end. Lashon Rabin. You don't say oat. You don't say wheats. I'm just saying my and then by default the only one left is rye. I never got the shifan and rye, but that helped me. Make your own simin. Don't remember it, wie du willst, but you should know that it's chamisha devarim. Whether you remember it or not, it is what it is. These chamisha devarim isn't only chamisha devarim connected to the obligation of challah. Mishnah is going to say it's also connected to the prohibition of chadash. Let's read it inside. That harei elu chayavim bechallah, only elu. Now the Mishnah adds a nuance which does not mean what you think it means. What does Rabbi say? Umitztarfen zemze. So let me go back to, let's go with the words of Chazal. The minimum shear of a dough that has to have challah removed from it is when the flour was in the amount of 5 roiva hakavs or 43.2 medium chicken eggs. Whatever that means, from 2.5 pounds to 5 pounds. I'm giving you the extremities. Maybe there are other nuances of opinions, and we're going to have plenty about this in greater detail. Now, what happens if I have that total amount? Let's go today with the 5 pounds. Kula alma, you're going to make a challah with a bracha. I don't have 5 pounds from wheat, but it's a mixture of these 5. That's what it sounds like Rebbe is saying, but that's not what it means. Says Rebbe that they combine one with the other to make the amount. Look inside, we're going to learn. We are familiar, for many of us that are already inside Yerushalmi for a while, we're having the same noise kelim. Again, to mention that the oldest of these achroinim is the Rash Shadilio, but I would like to start learning with Amara Fulda. So the second line from the top, umitztarfim zemze, yeah, we interpret it correctly. Lahashlim hashir ha'isa hachayeves bechala. But it's not the way you think. Kedarkei ba'kodesh, we always mention, just like Chumash Rashi. If you don't learn Rashi, Rashi is the pshat. You don't know the pshat of the Chumash. Lahavdol the goyim, they don't know the Chumash because Torah beperusha nitna. Rebbe also has that. Rebbe, for many reasons, put everything in these few words. The whole oral Torah is somehow in the Mishnah. Mishnah is a holy thing. So for whatever other reason, Rebbe wrote things in a way where you have to know the pshat. So says the Marafulda, it doesn't mean that any one of the 5 combines with any other ones of the 5s, even though that's what it's not that. You know why? Because the min b'she'enoi minoi enam etztarev kidetnan lekaman reish peirik dalad. Even in the Mishnah you have this. Rebbe clarified it, not now, in the 4th chapter. Elo, there is a combination, but that will be chitim with its type. So it's like a avana tulda. The tulda of chitim is spelt. It's kusmin. Chitim and kusmin are mitztaref. In the Bavli, I want to make it clear what I remember. I'm remembering from my memory that chitim and kusmin, and then it's barley, rye, and oats. In the Yerushalmi, it's befedish not that way. We're going to see that spelt, it can go with both. So it's chitim only with kusmin. Hasiyoidim, not only with rye and oats, but in the Yerushalmi, spelt is also going to go with barley, but wheat and barley don't go together. Wheat and rye does not go together. Wheat and oats do not go together. It's called min b'she'en aminoi. V'hasiyoidim etztarfim im hakoil. Thank you, Kevin, for a gavaldic picture. Chutz min achitim. However, v'hakusmim, says the Ramana Fulda, is both min chitim ein v'gam min so'idim. That's it. Now, is there any time, and we're Gemara mefarish emasai em etztarfim im b'she'en aminoi. This is not unique only to the din of challah. This is a more broader din that you don't combine min b'she'enoi minoi. And maybe I want to say right now what came to me. Maybe why did Rebbe not write chamisha minim? Because they're not chamisha minim. Why? Because chitim and kusmin are min. So he writes the bottom. That should be something. If it's true, someone said it. Don't worry. And if no one said it, then it's not true. Let's go right. It's called Chadash Asur Min HaTorah. Enkol Chadash Tach. At our time, I think the new that comes from the Rebbe is to show you a Pesach Hasidic way of understanding Ayin and Nigla. That is where there's room, a lot more room. Okay. So says the Mishnah. First of all, these Chamisha Levanim Harei Elo Chayavim Bechalom. It starts from Zem Zeh. Another din about the Chamisha, how they are all somehow connected, is Va'asurim B'Chodesh Melifnei HaPesach. One might have thought, when you read the Chumash, that I know the Torah says clearly, Velechem, V'Koli V'Karmi, Loi Soichlu, right? Shuki, the Ad Etzamai, clear. But if you read the Chumash, you might erroneously think that's for barley. Because since the Omer comes from barley, the Torah writes you can't eat that product prior to the Karban Omer. Maybe it only goes to barley. No, says Rabbi. All of the Chamisha Devarim are included in the Isur of Chadash. And by the way, the Isur of Chadash isn't only about not eating it, says Rabbi, guys, we learned this in Pesachim, in Bavli. Like, we're going to come to more pratim about this, that the normal way of harvesting itself is asur, because we want it to be reishis ketzirchem. The first harvest should be what is being harvested for the Karban Omer. And here again, it doesn't only mean that only barley should not be harvested prior to the temple treasurers harvesting the barley that will be brought for the Omer. And by the way, they harvested the night prior, and that harvesting is a mitzvah, and that harvesting is Doicha Shabbos. It means even if the 16th of Nisan, which is the day in which you bring the Karban Omer, is Shabbos, when they would harvest the barley? Friday night. Amazing. We're going to get all of that. The Isur of Ktsira, before the Omer is brought, or after, before the third temple is built, before we decide to build the Mizbeach, that it goes until the end of the 16th. With the whole Gemara, why not make it until at least noon? Because by that time, for sure, they brought the Karban Omer, because the Gemara says, because the Beis HaMikdash can be built very quick, and maybe the Beis HaMikdash won't be built by noon, but the Beis HaMikdash is going to be built by 4 p.m. Once you're building the temple, then you have to bring the Karban Omer to be able to eat Chadash. I want to just add one other thing for people not to forget. This whole Omer connected to Chadash, or Omer being matir the Chadash, is only regarding grains that will be eaten by commoners out of the temple. In the Beis HaMikdash proper, for karbanos to be allowed to be brought from the new grain, you know what has to be brought in the Beis HaMikdash? The Shtei HaLechem. Shtei HaLechem is matir karbanos to be brought. Generally, it's from wheat. The only other carbon of barley is the soita. Shtei HaLechem on Shavuos. Shtei HaLechem is also a matir. I remember this as Mamash as a kid. This is my Girsa de Yankasa. Not that, Omer is matir barley. Shtei HaLechem is matir wheat. No. Omer is matir all of the 5 minim, all of the 5 devarim, for me to eat it, for you to eat it. Whether Chadash is noig only Beretz Yisrael or Chutz La'aretz, that is the debate. The vast majority of the opinions that hold that Chadash midoraisa is noig bein ba'aretz, bein b'chutz la'aretz. So says the Or Zarua. The Alter Rebbe, I'm quoting again Girsa de Yankasa, who didn't have that Or Zarua, did not bring that opinion down. The Alter Rebbe took the Or Zarua's opinion very much into his Shulchan Aruch. So the Alter Rebbe actually paskins that Chadash is only noig ba'aretz, which is why in many Hasidic groups outside of Israel, there isn't that much of an emphasis of Chadash. I would say what I learned when I was a child, the same chashivus that we as Chabadnikim have, and many others, I'm sure, about Chalav Yisrael versus Chalav Akum, the Litvisher world has regarding Chadash. Same. And we're learning from each other, which is a great thing. Even here in LA, I don't even think you can get something that's not Yoshem. Because why not? It used to be that it was hard to identify. Today you can identify not only in a Yiddish bakery. And there's so many opinions that say that it's noyeg, even b'chutz la'aretz. I remember Rab Leib, my Rosh Yeshiva from Miami, he used to say that in Russia, there was so much poverty. Since there were some that held that Chadash is not noyeg b'chutz la'aretz, sometimes Rabbanim have to be practical. Some halachis make life very difficult. And there was that fifth Shulchan Aruch. How can you be machmer? Then, when that might have meant people would push it, not have bread. Not having bread would mean to starve. I know that it's a new world. Today, people don't want to eat bread. In the good old days, that's all they had. They had meat for Yontif, for Shabbos. They couldn't afford bread. If you didn't have in Russia a shtickle bread, you would mamish hunger. So they were lenient. I'm just saying all of these reasons why even in our group where we follow the Alter Rebbe, of course, it's very common that people now today won't have Chodesh. But anyways, coming back to the Mishnah. Now, says the Mishnah, how does it work? How does it work? In other words, first of all, now we don't yet have a carbon. And so now the day itself is the matir, the 16th. You have to wait until the end of the day. But what's pshat? So the Mishnah says, Ve'im hishrishu koidem lo'omer. If the barley took root before the omer, that barley that wasn't even ready to be harvested had omer being matir it. You get it? Why? Because it took root. But then ha'omer matiran. But if the barley did not take root, even though it was planted, you know when it will become allowed to be eaten? Only after next year's Omer, or after next year, 16th of Nisan. V'im lav, asura machiyavei ha'omer haba. A lot more about this in the Gemara. Point of the Mishnah is that the din of Chamisha Devarim is negeya not only to Chala, it's also negeya to Chadash. And that's a big thing because one might have erroneously associated Chadash to barley only. And all of the dinim, the Isur Achila of Chadash, and the Isur of Ktsir of Chadash, is not only to the barley, it's to all of the Chamisha Devarim. People like to welcome back Moshe Barber. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. First topic will be, what's the source that the din of challah goes to the chamisha devarim? Maybe it goes to all other flours you made bread. What's the pasuk that we read? Right? Because the Torah speaks about lechem. Ask a person nowadays, a lot more than then, what's bread? Taipoka. I know this from my house. Tapioca, but did they have a yuvda? Right? And you know what? When they toast it, they'll trick you. You won't even know. I know this. Yeah, it's gluten-free. So let's go. So we're going to have in the Gemara two mahalchim as to the source. Two different sources. One source will be the following. Ksiv, it says, I'm recording the pasuk that we said in our intro, pasuk in Shlach, for hoya ba'acholchem mi lechem ha'aretz torimu truma lashem. Says the Braisa, Yochel Yu Kol Hadvarim Chayavim Echala. Kol Hadvarim, again, the word Dvarim means all. And let me tell you, let me begin, guys. Rice and millet flour. Let me begin with those two. You have almond flour. You have starch flours, which is corn flour. You have coconut flour. You have chickpea flour. Tapioca flour. That's what I know. If I would invite, maybe Levana will tell you put on the chat, another 20 flours. There's so many other flours, mamish, from which you mamish make bread. Kartoshka flour. Vlad is looking at me like, what happened to my mind? Okay, so Yochel Yu Kol Advarim Chayavim Echala. No, Talmud Loimer, it's from the milechem. Milechem, the word milechem is a exclusionary word. We're familiar with this. V'loi kol lechem. Okay, shkoyach. So let me tell you something. Once the Torah is not telling you what to exclude. So where do you draw the line? So the Gemara says, Im milechem v'loi kol lechem. Why don't we only include, let me use what many say, the most commonly used flours for bread, which is wheat and barley. That's the Havamina. Milechem, okay, so why are we even including what are indeed called the toldois? I got this word somewhere, obviously in toldois, which will be kusmin, which we just learned that in the Bavli, if I remember correctly, it's connected to wheat. In the Yerushalmi, it's connected to wheat and to barley. And then you have oats, shabai l'shual, and shifoin, and rye, it's a tulda, it's a derivative, it's a subspecies of barley. So you're calling them already subs. So why don't you only include, at least midai raisa, only wheat and barley in the obligation of, if you make a dough from it, you have to separate challah. So you have a inclusionary word. What does it say? Talmud Loimer Reishis Arisoi Sechem. Which word is inclusionary? I'm going with the Mara Fulda. The Arisoi Sechem. Look inside the first Mara under the Gemara. Reishis Arisoi Sechem. Ribam Kol Iros. B'mashma, any dough. You made dough, you got to do it. You made a dough, you got to separate challah. So asks the Gemara, now whoever is joining on board, this will be a typical back and forth in the Yerushalmi, which doesn't go that far, and it generally ends with a question, doesn't even want to give you the answer, won't even say teku. That's the point. Riba hakoil asks the Gemara, okay, if you have a miut and a riboy, so why didn't you say that riba hakoil? You know, klal uprat. So this klal uprat uklal, you have a riboy, miut and riboy, and here you have just like it's like prat uklal. Here there's a miut. The first pasuk says milechem, as we learned. Milechem is pasuk yutes shalach pedek tes vav pasuk yutes v'hoya b'cholchem milechem ha'aretz tzrim utrum al Hashem, and then in the next pasuk it says reishus harisrei sechem. So you should end up including more, and the Gemara doesn't answer. Dafka. Look inside the Mara folder to learn how to learn Yerushalmi. Riba hakoil, the second line in Mara under the Gemara. Kushi, that's a kasha. Well, now that you have after the exclusionary milechem, you have now an inclusionary word. So narabe kol haminim umaro isol rabois only hashloisha haminim and ulamayit ha'oides and the doichen. That's the Gemara's kasha. Continues the Mara folder ve'ein tirutz l'kush yezois. The Yerushalmi doesn't answer it. Why? The way he learns. Because the leichashla. Because it found it unnecessary. The Gemara in the Yerushalmi is trying to make you think. It's like a good teacher. The Rabbi Yochanan did not answer because he wants you to answer it. And what's the answer? The hod de marbinon hashloisha devarim lefi shehein minam shalaprat. In other words, we just said that wheat, you have to be a botanist. Maybe a botanist. Maybe there's a better word when it comes to grains. If you would know the mitzias, you would know that spelt is wheat, mita modification. That oats and rye is barley. In other words, they are unique. They're related a lot more than rice and millet and tapioca and corn and all other flowers. But the Yerushalmi doesn't answer. It just brings up the kash. Back in the Gemara. Now, who gave this answer? To me, it sounded like a braisa, the way it went back and forth. So the Gemara says that there are two versions, ultimately, in the name of the Tana Rabbi Yishmael, as to what's the reason. The first is this, that Rabbi Yosi, B'Shem Rab Shimon, Tanei, Rabbi Yishmael came. He had a braisa from Rabbi Yishmael that learned, how do you know it's only Chamisha Devarim? From the limud that we had, which is, you have Milechem, you have Arishoy Seichem, and somehow that leads you to the Chamisha Devarim and to the exclusion of all else. However, it's amazing, also B'Shem Rabbi Yishmael, but other Amoraim had B'Shem Rabbi Yishmael another limud. That's the next line of the Gemara. Who are the other Amoraim? Rabbi Yoina, in the name of Rab Zeira. According to one tradition, in the link is in the name of Reish Lakish, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael. Before we say what he says, it's a Gzeira Shava. Before we say what he says, it's amazing how it was important, always, Babli, Yerushalmi, B'Shem Amrei, to know the link. There is another version that doesn't have Reish Lakish in this link. That's the next line. Amar Rav Mana, I want you to know that we didn't even say what the other version of Rabbi Yishmael is. But when I went to Keisarin, Ushmas, and I heard Daf Aleph Amid Beis, that the following, you'll see, it came down to us, but you know who will Dafka not be mentioned? Reish Lakish, Rab Achva, and Rab Zeira. And he's saying, Rav Mana is saying, and my father. The father of Rav Mana was Rabbi Yoina. So what did we have before, guys? Before we had Rabbi Yoina in the name of Rab Zeira, in the name of Reish Lakish, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael. Don't forget, Reish Lakish was already in that generation, the first era of the Amoraim. So here, Hava Amalei, B'Shem Rabbi Yishmael, without Reish Lakish, that's all it means, which is very significant. So now you know, so the second version either came to us through Reish Lakish or without Reish Lakish. The limud of the five, to the exclusion of all other flowers, are learned from Gzeira Shava, lechem by challah, from lechem by the mitzvah of matzah. Let's read it inside. Nemar lechem ba Pesach. And Let me read the pasuk. The pasuk reads, "Lo soichal olav chametz." The same pasuk. Don't eat chametz. Shivas yamim toichal olav matzos. Then the Torah says, "Vas is matzos lechem oini ki bechipazon yotzatsa me'eretz Mitzrayim v'goymer v'goymer." I'm quoting Dafka this pasuk. First of all, you have the Torah calling it lechem oini. The word oini has two meanings, right? That we learned this together. Either oini means the way most people think oini means, it's the bread of the poor because there's nothing other than flour and water. Or lechem oini means poor people don't even have shleimus. That's one of the reasons why we break the matzah. When we make the bracha, we are holding in our hands takatu shleimos, but also broken, poor people. Also lechem oini, lechem she'oinin, all of dvarim harbe. That's why our minig is throughout the magid. Remember, we lift the ka'ara, you cover it whenever you pick up the wine, whatever. But the point is, the word lechem is written. I'm coming back to this pasuk for a reason. And it says lechem b'chala. What's the word lechem? V'hoya ba'acholchem mi lechem haaretz. But it's not from the mi lechem v'loy kol lechem. Lechem lechem. So now we have Gzeira Shava, which is ma lechem shenemar ba'Pesach. It's amazing. This pasuk juxtaposes. It's called the hekesh. Lo yisoichel olav chametz shivas yomim toichel olav matzos. Now, by the way, that's the whole other. Shivas yomim toichel olav matzos. You have a pasuk that says sheshes yomim you eat matzah. That's the 8th rule that we say, that we should say every day. Rabbi Shmuel Omer. What's the 8th rule? That davar is that when you have something that's yotza mein yanoi, not only is it's everything else. In other words, Hashem says 7 days eat matzah. Then Hashem says 6 days eat matzah. So you would think that this pasuk is being taking out the last day. Not 7 days, only 6 days. No, it means none of the 7 days are you mechuyev to eat matzah. You're not allowed to eat chametz. When are you mechuyev to eat matzah? Only ba'erev toichlo matzahs. That's that limit over there. But the point over here is not the chiyuv we know is only in the night of. The point is that whenever there is a chiyuv to eat matzah, which is the night of the Seder, the first night, ba'erev toichlo matzahs. What is matzah? Matzah is something that's made from a grain that could have become chametz, for which Hashem says, Lo yisoichal olav chametz, shivas yomim toichel olav matzahs. If you're making dough from a flour, that the way halacha defines chimutz, it can never become chametzdik, even though if you let rice flour sitting, it's going to become inflated. But that inflation is called rotting, like our gaiva. Beda, it's rotting. Oh, davar shu bal l'dei matzah v'chametz. Only that is something from which you can be yoytze the mitzvah of matzah, which means that if you make matzah from any of the flours that we mentioned, from almond flour, from rice flour, from millet flour, from corn flour, from coconut flour, from tapioca flour, from potato flour, you're not yoytze. In halacha, we'll see a Tana that argues in a moment with some of what I just mentioned. Af lechem shenemer b'chala davar shu b'alidei matzah v'chametz. So that is the Gzeira Shava. Now Hashem did not tell us which ones leaven and which ones decay. Chachamim used what we'll call today empirical science to discover. Ubatku, that means Chazal, the Chachamim Gedolim. They made a bedika. They investigated. And what did they discover? She'ein locha baladei matzah v'chametz ela chameshes. Look at the words over here. Not devarim. Chameshes haminim bilvad. U'sha'ar kol hadvarim. Ein baladei matzah v'chametz. You're talking about to me, to a commoner, right? In the naked eye, you mix flour of I mentioned with water and just let it sitting. You'll see that it's going to become bloated. Yeah, bloated doesn't mean leavened. Bloated will be that. It's a different type of bloating. I know that there are better scientific words for this that I don't know. Ella lidei sirchain. Halach, it's called it's spoiling or it's rotting. So I already told you my theory, and maybe you may come with a better theory. That dafka in our Mishnah, when we're saying there's tziruf, and since tziruf doesn't mean what it means, it's only min b'minoi. So he couldn't write Chamisha Minim, because then you would take a learn the pshat, mitzdaref everyone with the other. Whenever you don't make mention of tziruf, then you can afford to say the more commonly used word, Minim, chamisha minim. Shulchan Aruch, I think it says chamisha minim. It doesn't say chamisha dor. Huh? Talks about it. Okay. Says the Gemara. I want you to know after all of this, so now guys, first of all, this is important. We have two sources for the chamisha. Miyut and ribui, gzeira shava. Says the Gemara, Tani, we learned in a brayso, so you should know there's another Tana. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that I will add, it's not only the chameshes dvarim or minim. Karmis is fennel, flour, according to some people, rye, grass, according to some, that includes rice flour. This is big, even though karmis does not mean rice flour, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is including that type, which will include rice, is also chayeves bechala. Now let me go like this. Let's go with this Gezeira Shava. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Vlad, is not arguing with the Gezeira Shava. That means if there is a Tana that holds that it's not chameshes minim. I'm not going to say 6 because maybe it includes rice, but there's more that doesn't contradict the Gezeira Shava. That would mean that according to him, you can make matzah from fennel flour and fulfill your obligation of be'erev toichlo matzahs. Why? Because this Tana holds that when you put the fennel flour with water, what happens is chimutz and not sirchain. Problem is machlekes metzias. So let's go. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Amar. You know why he argues with our Mishnah? Because ba'a he lidei matzah v'chametz. Our chachamim, everyone else, amrin einam boim lidei matzah v'chimutz. Asks the Gemara, this is the classic question, how can there be a machlekes in reality? No, we said even more, according to the ones that have this from a Gezeira Shava, Hashem told us which words could be used for a Gezeira Shava. Ein adam dan Gezeira Shava, Elam Kain, he learned it from his Rebbe. Okay, so we know which lechem, but Hashem did not tell us which flowers become chametz, which becomes rotten. Who made that? We learned before that batku umatsu. So let them be boidik. The Yivdekua asks the Gemara. Answers the Gemara, al iker bidikusa hein chalken. They made a bedika. You have to know halachically how to understand reality. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Amar bidakua umetzuah shibaludei matzah v'chametz. Let me say like this: whatever happens, everyone will agree that it doesn't come to chametz gomer. There is chametz aspect and there's a sirchain aspect. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, it's enough chametz dik for you to say baladei chimutz, so you can do the mitzvah of matzah. Gezeira Shava, you're chayiv midoiraisa to separate challah from karmis flour, perhaps even rice flour. Aber v'rabanan amrin that bidakua v'lei matzah oisa shehiba lidei matzah. I'm using the words chimutz gomer. I got it from the Marafulda. In other words, there's some amount of leavening. It's not chimutz gomer. And halachically, how do you view something that's not chimutz gomer? Okay, beautiful. Says the Gemara, Tamon. Or more. Says the Gemara, Tamon Tanina, and Chavra, we learned this together. A Mishnah in Trumais, we're going to have the same concept. Tapuach, we spoke it out when we learned Trumais. This is from Rabbi Schachter. Tapuach over here doesn't mean an apple. Clearly not. Tapuach is some sort of citrus. That's a Tosfos. First of all, I want to go back. Tapuach here means an esrig, I think Tosfos says. It's a citrus. That tapuach sheriskoi, that if you crushed an apple, I'm just teaching it the literal amaratza shetaich of tapuach, and the unasani l'toichis, and you put it into a chulin dough, and this tapuach is truma. So let me just say bekitzer, a quick chazaram, right? That maskifin haschalta ba'ashlamta. What did we learn in the previous mesechta? If you have shuki, truma got mixed into chulin. Midoy raisa, batal beroiv. Midrabanan, by truma, it's not enough 1 in 60. You have to have a ratio of 1 in 100. If you don't have 1 in 100, midrabanan, you have, it's called dimua, meduma. However, if you have the ratio of 1 in 100, even though you have to remove any one to give to the kohen, but the rest is chul and gomer. There are exceptions. One exception is that if the truma is the leavening agent, if it is modifying everything else, it's never going to be batel. So now we have a machlokes tanoim, whether if this tapuach sheriskoi that got mixed into a dough of chulin, whether it was machametz the dough, machlokes metzias, same thing. The chimetzah. So the Braisos, the Mishnah says there's only one opinion. The Chachamim harezu asuram, because since it caused everything else to become chametz dik, it's never batel. I don't care if the ratio was less than 100 to 1 to 100. The Tana Rabbi Yossi says mutter, and the same Gemara Rabacha b'shem Rababo b'shem Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina ma pligin. First of all, he clarifies the tapuach itself. Vadai does not cause everything else to become leavened. The only thing that can cause everything else to become leavened, according to the Chachamim, is b'machametz b'meimov. So the juice of this crushed esrog or this crushed citrus, or if you want to go with the simple, the crushed apple. Avol b'machametz b'gufay divrei hakol muter. It swelled. That swelling is called spoilage. And now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi kedate, Rabbi Yossi follows l'shitosei. To Amar Tamon, and that will be the final thing we'll learn today, guys, Masechta Shabbos, the beginning of Moed. What happens, my friends, if you have a kettle? That's the case of the Mishnah. Kettle was on fire. The kettle was removed off the fire, but there's boiling hot water in it. Am I allowed to put an egg adjacent to it when the egg is going to become cooked on Shabbos? So what did we have? That do Amar Tamon, in Masechta Shabbos, we have Ein Tafshilei Tafshil Barur. Right, Rabbi Yossi holds that you are allowed to place the egg on Shabbos besides a kettle when it was recently removed off the fire. When the kettle is on the fire, no one says you can do that because it's cooked. It's not cooked dumber. So just like when it comes to cooking, it's not a machlokes and metzias. Is it cooking? It's how do you halachically define cooking? What happens if something is as I semi-cooked? Coming back to fennel flour, it's not true leavening, and that's why you could have such an argument. That was a wonderful beginning.
Fair. Thank you, Rabbi.
Mem test off the way we have it, and I'm excited. So many people that want to learn by the Omer, I know minig is to learn Masechta Soita. Now with this new pagination, aside of Masechta Shavuos, Hasta Breda, you can learn Masechta Chala.